What's up, boys? I think democracy is dying. I think, or at least the way we currently understand it, it's a relatively new concept in its current form. Obviously, the ancient Greeks and the Romans had, a form of democracy. It wasn't among the people, the average, the plebes, as they used to call them. It was among the wealthy and powerful, class that only got into those positions of wealth and power by either inheriting it or subjugation. So, democracy, with the quotation marks around it. And, especially back in the Roman days, the senators were voting for other senators, and Caesar wasn't an emperor until he decided he was, but they all knew each other. They were friends. You were voting for your pals, and you were kind of making sure that you would vote in people that would reflect your power and to keep you in power and to reflect your positions and your friends and your family. Now, that being said, that's democracy, technically, if we're using the most rigid definition possible. So in that sense, yes, it's a, very old, over 1,000-year-old concept. But democracy as we know it, the way it has been manifesting for the last 100, 200 years since the French Revolution, basically. That's, obviously in human history, that's a very new concept. And, we've had a good run. It's been fun. It's been quite an experience, but, I do believe it's dying. Again, am I doom scrolling too much? Perhaps. And do I think it's all gonna collapse in one, final blow? No, it's gonna be gradual, and it's gonna start with one country, and then it's gonna move on to the neighboring countries, and then it's eventually gonna kind of be, pretty much dead, at least for the countries, I'm sorry to say it like this, but the countries that matter, to the world, like the United States and China. China's already given up on that experiment. They never really started. Anyway, the big boys, the big players, the big boys in power, the U.S., and its proxies, Europe and its proxies, it might be still around for different pockets and different cultures and sections of the world, but, eventually I think that, it's going to be an experiment that came and went, and historians are going to look back at this time between the French Revolution and, the next 150 years or less, because I think it's going to be around that time frame. And it's going to be something that historians are going to remember, and I'm sure philosophers and people in the future will, say, let's go back to that. That was great. Like, how did we stop having such a fantastic system that gives everyone a voice and all these things, right? So, obviously that's a future problem. But it's in the current present day, it's the foundations of the collapse are already in place. Now, is it going to collapse overnight? Like I said, no. It's going to take at least 100 years, maybe more. But I do think it's going to be gone. Like I said, it's a relatively new concept. So, most of human history has not been a democratic society. We have been ruled by strongmen forever, in different shapes and forms, whether that's a military dictatorship or an emperor or a king or whatever kind of autocratic council system, or whatever different forms of dictatorship you want to call it. That's pretty much the norm. I think men yearn to be ruled by strong men. And I don't know really how to explain why. I guess because it kind of takes the effort of being informed and of giving a shit about your fellow man out of the picture. Democracy, I think the way we have it set up now, the people who set up these systems probably hoped that, first of all, it evolved over time. So, let's use the US, for example. When the founding fathers, declared independence and founded a democratic country, again, democracy with quotation marks. Only if you were white and wealthy and owned land and, had a certain social status could you participate. If you were a woman, haha, no. If you were, any kind of minority or oppressed class, haha, no. If you were, not even a landowner, just like a poor peasant, factory worker, or, I guess they didn't have factories back then. Oh, I guess they might have. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. The grand majority of the people still couldn't participate. People got more rights over time, whether that was for African American communities or Native American communities, women, minorities, essentially. They gained more rights as time went on, and then more and more people got included into the democracy bubble. So, again, would the founding fathers have agreed with what this current state of democracy is now? Probably not. They'd probably be wondering why, first of all, they'd be wondering where all the slaves are. Second of all, they'd be wondering why women have rights. They'd probably be wondering why, certain religious groups, certain groups have rights. And that's the problem with the modern democracy, is that it isn't, like, we don't have a framework of reference for this to work out, because this was never the original intention of the experiment in the first place. Now, is it better than when the founding fathers were around and they, didn't give democratic rights to everyone? Obviously, yes. Obviously, yes. The most people possible should be... Sorry about that. The most people possible should be able to participate, obviously. And I think it is generally, pretty successful system and way of choosing our elected officials generally. I just think that because it's such a relatively new concept, and because most people don't give a shit or pay attention or care, it's bound to collapse. I mean, how many people do you know that don't even vote? You probably know at least one or two people, if not more. If not, maybe yourself watching don't even give a shit because, oh, my vote doesn't matter, or it's always the same two parties that win. And all of those are fair arguments to make. Also, the way our voting system is, I don't know about in other countries in Europe, I know they have a lot better systems there, but in North America anyway, pretty freaking terrible. And again, that brings in a lot of apathy in people, and, the people who do participate, how many of them really believe in it? Probably not most. You vote for the person you want, or the party you want, and you just call it a day. Yeah, I mean, it's, it sucks because, as important as it might seem, most people just can't be bothered to participate or to pay attention or care. That's another thing too, is paying attention too. You can participate, but if you don't even know who the candidates are or what parties they are running in, or what their platforms are, like, a lot of people just show up and press an X on the thing, on the piece of paper, and just go home on the first name they see. It's just, yeah, okay, democracy, but You know, if the people aren't informed, then what's the point, right? And I think that a lot of people in high positions, and people overall, would be, you know, don't really care enough to matter. Like, they don't care enough to see that if democracy collapses, what kind of impact that will have on them. Because I do think that would be a very bad thing for society overall. But like I said, I think people yearn to be ruled over. People are not leaders, they're followers. And if you can just take out all that inconvenient, you know, following an election and watching the stupid ads on TV and watching those horrendous debates that we have that are all performative, and you know, all of the stuff that involves being a responsible, informed voter, most people would much rather just not have to do all that stuff, and most people don't. And you know, that leads to situations where we have, you know, corporations and billionaires in charge of the countries, and that's a bad thing for everyone except for themselves, obviously. But yeah, I don't know, man. I just think I'm not trying to say, oh, we need to do something about it, or we need to, you know, whatever, we need to save democracy. I mean, I do think we do need to save democracy, but I don't think there's anything that, you know, the average Joe can do about it. I think it's already, I think the wheels have already turned on that process starting, so it's already kind of too late, I'm sorry to say, unfortunately. And the point of the video was really just to bring this up and say that this is what I'm witnessing, or I think is happening. And unfortunately, I know this is kind of sucks that I rambled all this time without providing a solution, but I don't really know or think there is a solution. And I think the average person is just fine with that. I think it's more in our nature to be ruled over by a king or a dictator, and I think that for the most part, people really can't be bothered to give a shit about democracy being around at all. And like I said, that's a bad thing, but it seems to be where we're heading. And I guess, you know, democracy was like a blip in history, and the status quo of being ruled over is going to be something that future generations are going to have to just get used to. And I think they will, because it's in our nature, and it's unfortunate, but that is in fact what I believe is happening.